Blizzard slammed us with a surprise patch out of nowhere that shook up a ton of characters in the meta. So we're going to talk about the big winners and losers, other characters that you should be playing now that all these things are changed, and how to navigate this meta so that you win the most amount of games as possible. But if you really want to win, you got to smash that like and subscribe, because that's the only way to get 5 free wins on the house. And let's jump right into the video. Now, the first category, let's talk about winners that actually got something directly changed about them in the patch notes. First off, Ramattra did get some huge changes, especially to that Nemesis form, and it's gonna turn Ramattra into a pretty powerful tank, especially in the hands of someone that has learned the intricacies of the character. If you've been grinding Ramattra for quite some time, now's the time to actually start getting some wins with him. Keep in mind that the primary value that you're going to get from this character is going to be centered around that Nemesis form. So during your poke, you're oftentimes just going to play really passive. Make sure to properly distance yourself away from characters like Roadhog, never getting into his effective range. And then when an opening opens up, you call it to your team, you pop that Nemesis form, and you go chase down some targets that you already whittled down and forced out as many cooldowns as possible while you are in that poke form. Now, another winner that we definitely got to talk about is undoubtedly Ana. Ana is so freaking powerful. She can 2-shot characters like Tracer, 3-shot characters like Cassidy, has a nade that lasts much longer, and Ana is just a freaking god right now. But here's the thing that you have to do, because the number one character that shuts down an Ana is undoubtedly Kiriko. It's really important that you don't nade anything unless Kiriko's Suzu is down, and before that is down, nades should be purely used defensively, although oftentimes an aggressive nade is going to get you a ton more value, especially nading things like Hog, or just having a 4-second nade on a number of any characters is going to probably win the fight if Suzu's not there to cleanse it. This means that as Ana, you can put additional pressure into that Kiriko by simply shooting her from distance with your increased range, or trying to coordinate with your team when that Suzu is down. That being said, the number one tip that I'll give you on Ana is something that I've actually witnessed VOD reviewing a lot of Anas recently on my Patreon, which you can go check out down below, but Anas need to be more disciplined with everything you do. If you're healing, I want to see quick scope, consistent healing, not just lazily healing and missing half your shots. If you're trying to go for an aggressive play, I want to see a actual committal to that play. I want to see a committal to these nades. I want to see nades and sleeps done with intention, not reactionarily. You need to be cool, calm, and collected when you're playing Ana, and everything you do, every ability you use, needs to have a very specific intent, and it needs to be followed through completely, not just thrown out reactionarily, or you're just going to get very little value on this character. Now let's talk about some other characters that are actually winners, even if they weren't specifically talked about in the patch notes. First off, of course, the elephant in the room, Roadhog. Now, Roadhog definitely has a threat in Ana now who's much stronger than she was before. It's also important to understand that Roadhog is going to be the best tank far and away, and still going to be an absolute menace in this meta until we get some nerfs that are pretty far down the pipeline. Roadhog's a character that really demands respect, and you have to constantly be looking out for this Roadhog, pinging this Roadhog to your team, calling or taking note of the abilities that the Roadhog has, whether that's breather, whether that's hook, and your position can be more aggressive when the Roadhog hook is down, but once that Roadhog has that hook up, oftentimes you have to play near natural cover, make sure to never cement yourself in the open, and always keep track of the loud goddamn footsteps so you don't get caught out by this character. Roadhog is going to be a big problem, and in addition to all those things, especially if you have an Ana on your team, keeping track of when the Kiriko has Suzu, talking to your teammates about how to fight the Roadhog is going to be the best way in order to shut him down. And of course, having a duo or trio queue to do that better is going to make your job easier, because coordinating with randoms can be a bit difficult. I would say this is one of the most difficult solo queue metas period right now, unless you specifically are that Roadhog main. Now, another tank that actually gets quite a bit stronger in a Roadhog meta is actually Sigma. Sigma's really good at distancing himself away from a hog and good at spamming from distance. While yes, Sigma can be hooked through his kinetic grasp and things like that, it is important to understand that Sigma can just keep poking out a Roadhog, keeping the team distanced enough where the Roadhog doesn't get value, but the goal here is to constantly be backing up, never allowing that Roadhog to get into hook range, while you slowly whittle down the enemy resources, bait out all of their abilities, stun the hog with rock when he tries to breathe, and build up really fast ultimates. I think Sigma not only is good against Hog in the head-to-head, but he also is really good at enabling compositions that are good against Hog, which we'll talk about in a second. Next up, of course, Kiriko is still going to be phenomenal. If you are a Kiriko, though, I want to make it clear that you should not be playing in a way that forces your Suzu out early. It's okay for you to have to force teleport, but if you're wasting your Suzu and then your Hog gets naded and you're not there to save him, you don't have the carry guide on your side anymore. And it's really your job as Kiriko to try to conserve these Suzus to shut down every single Onanade if at all possible. It's an incredibly important thing to do now that Onanade is more powerful than before, and as Kiriko, you have to play in a way that allows you to cancel it. So just keep that in mind. You need to sandbag this ability more than before. Now, let's talk about some DPS that are actually becoming better in this new meta. First off, let's talk about Reaper. Already good, but Reaper is actually stocked to see even more play, not only capable of bullying a character like Roadhog if he doesn't have his breather, although he does have to play around that one shot still, but being able to nano a Reaper is also very powerful, and On is going to see more play. Nade plus Reaper together is going to be able to kill something very, very quickly. And I do think that Reaper stocks actually go up in this patch than before, because especially Doomfist seeing a stock decrease, Reaper had a pretty hard time sometimes against Doomfist because Doomfist could distance him out, cancel his ult, never actually fight him directly. But outside of that, any long distance poke DPS is going to be good in this meta. You never want to put yourself in a position where you have to get into the Hog's range, so characters that could fight from a very long distance, characters like Ashe, characters like freaking Echo, these characters are going to get more value on average. Even a character like Junkrat, anything that has long distance poke is going to be very, very good going into this patch, because you need to have consistent value and you need to not be afraid for your life. I put Reaper in a separate category because I think he's the only true close range DPS that actually still is justifiable in playing and very strong. But as far as long distance DPS, pretty much all of them are going to be good. Now, next up, we got to talk about losers, and at the top of the list is definitely Sojourn. Sojourn is getting hurt a lot from these changes, and while I do think that Sojourn is still very powerful, she's not going to be an absolute god anymore unless you get that Mercy Pocket. If you can set up for that Mercy Pocket every single time you're playing in a duo or whatever the case may be, Sojourn can still be an absolute menace as long as you make sure to not actually use those slides too proactively and just become this ever-present threat that can do burst damage out of nowhere, and you can still one tap with that damage boost. Now, of course, we also do have to talk about Tracer. Tracer did receive some damage nerfs, and that's going to put her back in line with probably a reasonable balance of Tracer. She was very, very strong before. But in addition to that, Anna's are going to be running around like crazy with the ability to 2-tap you now, because Anna's do 75 damage. And remember, the other support that's played a ton is freaking Kiriko, which can also kill you out of nowhere with headshot shurikens. And when you combine that with characters like Ashe that can 1-tap you, characters like Roadhog that can 1-tap you, Anna that can 2-tap you, Kiriko that can threaten you, and it all kind of comes down to Tracer is under a ton of pressure. And while you could definitely get Tracer to work, you have to be an absolute god, and I think that Tracers that aren't completely godly in this meta are going to have a really, really hard time staying alive and getting value. So Tracer stock definitely decreases. And then last but certainly not least is Doomfist. Well, I don't think that Doomfist is quite as weak as he was before. He's definitely nowhere near the power level that he was before these nerfs went through. And unless you're very, very skilled at Doomfist, you're going to have a super, super hard time in Roadhog meta. And I would say that he's going to be pretty bad until we see some huge changes to Roadhog down the line. I think that if the enemy is playing a character that you can easily bully, like Reinhardt, Doomfist is completely fine. And it's going to depend a lot on the composition of the enemy, whether or not you can get value on this character. But all in all, definitely taking a major L this patch. And if you're a Doomfist one trick, I'm sorry, but you didn't really have a lot of time in the sun to truly abuse him. Now, these are my winners and losers and tips and tricks to dominate this meta. Definitely let me know what characters you're going to main this meta and why down below. And smash that like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. I'll see you next time.